Welcome back to an extra helping of the award-winning Comfortably Hungry podcast with me, Sam Bilton, a food historian and author who is perpetually hungry. Here's another bonus episode to tide you over between seasons 4 and 5. I hope you enjoy it. I think the anchovy must be the most divisive fish on the planet. There are those who wrinkle their noses at the very prospect of coming into contact with this diminutive fish, even though they have probably consumed them in another form like Worcestershire sauce or in a recipe like Piedmont peppers. On the flip side, there is, to quote today's guest, a richly diverse global culinary community out there united by their shared devotion to the funk and savoury punch of these fish. Irrespective of your view, the anchovy has been the stalwart of the kitchen for centuries. To find out more about its history, I'm chatting today to renowned food writer Sudie Piggott, whose latest book, Consider the Anchovy, is a real love letter to this fish. Welcome to the podcast, Sudie.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the book. Before we dive into the briny world of the anchovy, can you tell me a little bit more about yourself?
I've had quite an eclectic career, as I think many people have. I've always loved writing. I found recently my first magazine, which I put together about the age of 7. So writing and journalism's always been in my blood. But I studied history at York University, and then I've worked in publishing and PR, and also sponsorship for the British Film Institute before I became a journalist. And as a journalist, I've long specialised in food and travel, but really written for most of the newspapers in the UK and quite a lot of international titles as well.
Excellent. So why anchovies? What is so special about them?
I love the history, and I love their... Well, I probably do love controversy a bit, so I quite liked how divisive they are, and the challenge of being an anchovy evangelist and trying to convince people who say they didn't like them to like them. But I also discovered that there was very little in depth that had been written about them in a kind of wide sense, and really, really looking at the producers. And I've always loved really artisan production. Like I love ceramics and handmade jewelry as well. And when I discovered in Couleur, a long time before I wrote the book, how utterly handmade anchovies were, I think I was hooked then, and I already liked the taste and would eat them quite a lot.
So what's your earliest memory of encountering anchovies?
My great aunt Lily's for tea, who was a foodie before the term was invented. They travelled quite a lot. She was quite lucky. Her dad had, he was a typical Jewish immigrant who started off with a small grocery, probably selling anchovies, but then worked very hard and managed to have some property, and he liked to travel, and so his young daughters as teens went on like Mediterranean cruises, which was kind of almost unheard of. But both Aunt Lily and my grandma Simi were really adventurous cooks, even before Elizabeth David, I think because they'd been exposed to this kind of food. Aunt Lily particularly liked doing posh teas. She was also very keen on playing the harpsichord. So she'd play the harpsichord, and I would accompany her very, very badly on my recorder, but she'd
That's quite a skill in itself, harpsichord. That's not an instrument that pops up every day, is it?
No. So she was quite eccentric. And then she'd make these beautiful teas. And I particularly remember the stuffed eggs, the deviled eggs, and she would put this anchovy paste, which came out of a tube called l'épicure, and then mix it up with various other things, with the yolks and horseradish and possibly even garlic, though that would have been quite difficult to find then. And the mayonnaise and so on. And I just really love the kind of punchiness of that. And I also really like the name Epicure because I was already quite into food myself, and it just sounded really sophisticated. But I have to say, I tried some Epicure anchovies recently for a tasting the chef Tom Hunt was doing for the Guardian, and they were disgusting.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the quality was not good at all. Yeah, I think they've been well overtaken by many, many better anchovy producers.
How long have we been fishing and preserving anchovies? Where does it sort of first begin?
It goes way, way back, further than the Romans, who everyone, well, people seem to believe the Romans invented everything. But the Phoenicians were the first who discovered how salting and fermenting anchovies, would produce this incredible, what we now call umami flavor, and would be a way of preserving them when they were sailing around, trading, all over Italy, Greece, what we know as Italy, Greece, and, everywhere really. So it started with them. Then the ancient Greeks were making garum before the Romans too. Some of the earliest discoveries have been made around an ancient and mostly actually in the sea now town called Empuras on the Costa Brava, which is near La Scala.
Okay, so how did they sort of travel across Europe then? Is that through trade? Because once it's preserved, I guess you can take it pretty much anywhere, right?
Yeah, you can, although it's best to be kept refrigerated. So I'm not sure that they would have had any kind of refrigeration then. And I guess that's why it was mainly consumed as garum rather than as actual anchovies then, because it lasted better and the taste was usually very funky.
Garum, in case people who are listening don't know, is essentially a fish sauce, isn't it?
Yes, it's been long fermented in salt. And nowadays, when you're preparing anchovies, you take out the guts and so on. But for making garum, everything would go in and be pressed in barrels and left to ferment for a very long time. And that's where you got this funky sauce for. And chefs now, 21st century chefs are obsessed with garum, and not only anchovy garums, but I've seen tuna and oyster and all manner of different garums.
Have you ever tried doing it yourself at home?
No, I don't think I'd really want to do that.
It's probably not going to go down very well, is it?
No, I mean, a lot of people still do make it at home, and say, particularly in somewhere like Chitara in Italy on the Amalfi Coast, which is where Colatura d'Alici, which is a slightly more sophisticated version of garum, is made. And I met several people who said they made it in their home just in a bucket, basically had a bucket of fermenting salted anchovies, and you're just thinking, whoa, if that would be.
Yeah. It's like I say, it probably doesn't make you very popular with your neighbours, I wouldn't have thought. Especially on a hot day like we've been having recently in Britain.
Oh, gosh, no.
So when we think about anchovies in Britain, most of us automatically think of tinned anchovies, the ones you buy in the supermarket. We can talk a little bit later about quality of anchovies and the ones that are available in said supermarkets. But what are the various ways of preparing anchovies? Because that's one of the things that particularly struck me in the book, is that it's, anchovies don't just come in tins. There's a whole different variety of ways. We've just talked about one in terms of converting them into a sauce. So what are the other ways in which, or preparations that anchovies can be done?
I mean, a lot of people will have come across what the Spanish called boquerones, and also prepared in Italy, in Sicily. And these are fresh anchovies that have been filleted and then are marinated in vinegar and olive oil. So they're kind of preserved straight away like that. They tend to go opaque white. And then they can be flavored in lots of different ways. I mean, mostly if you're buying them here from the supermarkets, they're just in vinegar, maybe with a little bit of Lemon Fish Forever does some quite good ones, and actually so does Waitrose, and some of the best marinated anchovies or gavros they call them. I had in Greece, in Athens, where they were marinated in this tangerine zest and served with chopped hazelnuts, and they were just absolutely delicious. So they can lend themselves to all sorts of different treatments. And then if you're really lucky, you can find fresh anchovies, and you can find them in the southwest coast of the UK.
Oh, really?
But not very often. Now's the best time. In August, you would be able to find them. And if there's demand amongst the fish restaurants, and I've been pushing very hard for them to put them on the menu, but it only really works if you're very, very near the coast, because fresh anchovies really need to be eaten the same day, and preferably the lunchtime after they've been caught. But people don't really know that they can be flash frozen, and they're really good quality, and they're not impossible to find. I mean, I know the Fish Society sells them, and I mean, a lot of the big wholesalers have them as well, and I think will sell them to you as a consumer. And they taste really good. I did a dinner earlier in the year at the Cartford Inn, and I thought they somehow had got fresh anchovies up to Lancashire, but they were fresh but frozen ones. And I'm doing a dinner at Caldesi on 19th of August. So we're doing a Ligurian stuffed anchovy dish, and again they're frozen fresh anchovies, and they taste fantastic.
Is there a season for them?
As with any fish, it does vary quite a lot depending on where you are. But kind of May, June tends to be the main season in Italy and on the Cantabrian coast. And it can go a little bit later on the Costa Brava coast. But yeah, high summer is the best time.
So one thing that particularly struck me about the history of the anchovy or anchovy processing is the role that women play. So I'm always interested in the female narrative in the stories I investigate. Can you explain why women like the Sobadoras, did I pronounce that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
I hope so.
Yeah.
The Sobadoras of Cantabria are so vital to the anchovy story?
It's a question of tradition, and it's always been women's work. And I've tried to question this. I mean, right from the very beginning when the anchovy production started in earnest in Cantabria, and that was a result of Italians coming mostly from Sicily, but also from southern Italy, because there weren't so many anchovies to be found in the Mediterranean, and heard they were absolutely plentiful on the Cantabrian coast. So Italians would come and work seasonally, and I assume that maybe they brought women with them who had already been producing them in Italy and Sicily, and in many cases they also met Spanish women and called their anchovy conservers after their new Spanish loves. But I was always told that Asobradoras had to be female because they had much more delicate, dexterous hands, which I don't. My hands are really big, and so I would not make a good Sobradoras. And when I had to go, I decided I was more of a Slobradoras because, well, actually, the first time I was really bad, but I did try again at Pujal de Solanas in Cantabria, where if you make an appointment, you can see around everything and have a little tutorial from a highly experienced Sobrador. So the second time, my effort was very slow, laborious, but not so bad. I mean, it's very delicate work, and it just always has been women's work. And if I asked about it, people were just adamant that that's how it is. I guess because their men were the fishermen, and so it made sense. It was something you did as a couple. The men were out at sea, and then the women, came to clean the anchovies and salt them and later fillet them. And that's how it's always been. And there's a really strong camaraderie among Sobradoras. I mean, is repetitive work, and some people even stand up and do it all day, which must be really tiring. But most women I spoke to did say they enjoyed it, and they enjoyed their community, and because they've been usually doing it for so many years, they could think about other things, put the world to right. There's quite a lot of gossip and probably quite salacious gossip going on, but my Spanish isn't good enough to understand it. And yes, there's a wonderful book I came across that had been published locally in Santonia, which is the epicenter of Cantabrian anchovies. And it's about many of the sobradoras and their history, and really, really lovely black and white photos. And again, they would say that it was in their family, their mothers, their grandmothers, their great aunts had done it. And that's just what they did, kind of almost unquestionably. It was a matriarchal line. But now, increasingly, there are female anchovy conservers owners as well, and they definitely make a point of treating their sobradoras even better.
Yeah, you mentioned one actually in the book.
Was it Anchovy, who are in Cantabria, and a lady called Sylvia?
Yeah, and the other one was Hazas as well.
Yes, and they're really new. Yeah, Anna. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to tell us a little bit about either or both of those as examples, and how the legacy is continuing?
Yeah, I mean, they're both really lovely, and kind of showing how strong the kind of family pull towards anchovies is. In the case of Angelica, she remembered her grandmother producing anchovies and being completely fascinated by watching her, and spent a lot of time with her, and decided that she wanted to kind of honor her and remember her by setting up her own conservus. And this is one of the newest ones in Santonia, and it's run by this lovely lady, Sylvie, and her son, a small team of women, and promoted from within. Her manager has been Sobradoras with her from the start. I think they've been going for about 15 years, and they had quite a small production unit when I visited last year, but they're just about to move into larger premises. Things are going really well for them. The quality is fantastic. They have quite a kind of meaty, complex depth to them, and they're doing pretty well on exporting as well, not only to the UK, but I gather to Australia and other places as well. It helps that her brother Alessandro is, I think he's a professor in journalism and marketing, and so he's been helping a lot. In a way, quite a similar story with Anna of Hazas, which is a little bit further into Asturias, actually. It's a town whose name I really don't know how to pronounce, which it's a double L, then Astres. Really, really pretty town, small fishing town, that had been quite important for anchovies, but had dwindled and dwindled. And Anna's parents run a deli grocery store which sold anchovies, but they hadn't really been produced in this town for quite a while. And she wanted to stay there with her husband, but it's quite difficult to find jobs in a small, quite traditional fishing town. And so they decided to start producing anchovies, and their company is called Hazas, and they are so incredibly meticulous. Again, it's still a very small production, but they actually use tweezers to take out all the little hairy bones. So it takes even longer than normal. And when I met with people in Santonia, there's an association or confraternity of anchovy lovers, which tend to be kind of retired men. And I mentioned that I was going to visit Hazaf. They just kind of laughed and said, oh, the tweezers are a kind of marketing ploy. But they weren't, because they were definitely using them. And when we popped back without announcing ourselves, they were still using them. And, their production is small. I mean, they can barely keep up, but my God, the quality is immense. And they also do these Gouda olive stuff with their anchovies, which are absolutely sublime, the best I've ever tasted. And like quite a few of the other Cantabrian anchovy producers, they've started doing anchovies in butter again, which is how they were first produced. And now there's a lot of interest in anchovies in butter again, and they've developed quite a few flavored butters. Their one with hazelnuts is absolutely wonderful.
Oh, it sounds making me hungry. and I have had my breakfast.
Well, I have had my breakfast, but I am actually having some anchovies on toast just to keep in the mood as well. These are Sicilian anchovies, and I'm just trying them out. I didn't actually have these ones when I was there. They're from a town called Schiaccia, but they're easier to obtain here than my favorite Sicilian anchovies, which are teste. But we're going to try and get them for the Caldesi dinner.
So I'm a fan of anchovies.
Good. How do you like them?
Well, it depends. I use them quite a lot in cooking, because before we started recording, I was saying there's one of those ingredients that you can add to a dish, and I particularly like putting them in meat dishes because it adds a flavour. Not fishy, doesn't make things fishy.
No, not at all.
But especially with things like lamb, it's just enhances the umami-ness. So I use them quite often to put in lamb. If I'm roasting a shoulder of lamb, I put anchovies in. Also, I mean, a lot in historic cooking. Certainly when you get the 19th century, when you first start looking into these recipes, you think, well, what's the point of like 2 anchovy fillets? But it's surprising how much flavour a small amount of anchovy can add to a dish. So I'm a big fan of that. But true. I'll eat them on a pizza. I'll eat them. I like the Boccherones style. I'm really fond of them. When we went to San Sebastian, I love the Gilders, which you have a recipe for in the book.
Oh, yeah. Gilders are very in at the moment. Yeah, yes. I really like. It's a fantastic appetite wetter. So it's usually an anchovy, a lovely plump olive, and a chili pepper. There's a particular kind from the area. I think they're called Baquilia. I've got some in the fridge. I need to check. But people are getting really creative with them. And my latest thing is, rather than a charcuterie board, doing a Gildas board where you have lots of different things you can put on them, like maybe little cubes of manchego or artichoke bottoms or quail's eggs, and people can make their own.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great thing to have, isn't it? And that's the other thing, anchovies historically, if you look again, sort of particularly 18th, 19th century, they were the king of the savoury course, which we don't really have these days. It's kind of been relegated to a starter now or a nibble like Gilders.
Yeah, there are a few places that will offer them, but particularly, with, scrambled eggs with some anchovies on top and maybe a few spread beneath them. But, places like, I think St. John's do them, and the German Street restaurant at Fortnum's and Wilton's, but more on demand. It's not something that that many people order.
Well, yesterday I actually made, sometimes you see it as a wet before dinner, or recipe I was using purely as a guide was William Verrill's, which is anchovies and parmesan, which is slices of toast, which I followed your advice. I did not get rid of the oil for the anchovies are in. I used the anchovy oil and fried some fingers of toast. Good. An anchovy fillet and parmesan, which again you'd think would be a bit over the top. You don't need a lot of parmesan, and then you grill it, and they were lovely. Went down a treat.
Goodness, that sounds fantastic. I don't think I've ever tried that.
Yeah,
And where and whose recipe is that?
that is a chap called William Verrill who wrote a book in the mid-ish 18th century. I think it was about 1759. But anyway, one of the things that surprised me, again, when I read the book, is I hadn't really taken on board how long it takes to mature anchovies. I know we've talked about fish sauce, but even anchovies in a tin, they don't just pop them in a tin. Well, not the good ones anyway. So can you talk us through a little bit about anchovy maturing?
Yeah, I mean, it varies a lot. The absolute minimum, I would say, is 4 to 6 months.
Yeah, it's a long time.
That's probably which starts to explain the cost of them, especially the more expensive ones, which will have been matured for at least 12 months, if not 18. And in some cases, like there's one particular rather elite brand, again, a very small company, Felipe in Santonia, and they're the anchovies of choice of Albert Adria and all the 3 Michelin star chefs in Spain who've worked with him. And they mature them for up to 2 years. And oh my goodness, they are absolutely and utterly sublime, kind of layers and layers of savoriness and nuttiness. And what surprised a lot of people is they're probably more hammy in the kind of acorn fed Iberico, but a lot of ham and fishiness, and really, really extraordinary.
That's interesting. So the length of time they're matured really does impact on the flavour. Is that as opposed to where they've been fished? I mean, I suppose if you're in the Mediterranean, it's a Mediterranean. So
Yeah, although the Cantabrian Sea, Bay of Biscay, is a bit different. I mean, there are slight differences according to the sea and the kind of how salty the sea is, but also another factor is the ratio of kind of salt to water when they're being salted, and that's kind of like the dosage of champagne. That's the house secret, and they maintain that that's key to their quality and to their taste.
well, they're certainly highly regarded across Europe, because the other thing that surprised me is the amount of towns across Europe, or in the Mediterranean particularly, but probably also Cantabria, that have festivals celebrating the anchovy. What would you say is the best festival that you've been to date?
Well, one of the best ones is actually coming up soon, and that's in La Scala on the Costa Brava coast, which is near all these amazing ruins and empuras. And La Scala has quite a few anchovy producers in the town still. The Cantabrian producers are a bit sniffy about them. I wouldn't say they're superlative, but they're a bit more kind of salty and raunchy, not of the kind of impeccable pedigree, but their festival is really, really fun, not least because they have an anchovy passport system, which means you can get an anchovy passport and it has little stamps for all the different bars and restaurants you visit with a different anchovy based tapa. And they also have music and fireworks and dancing, kind of the whole thing.
Sounds like great fun.
That's really good fun. Yeah, yeah. And they're also wonderful festivals in Couleur. That happens earlier in the year in June, but quite a few people have restored the original wooden barks, the fishing boats, brightly coloured. They're sunk permanently in the little harbour in Couleur, and they, for the festival, they sail them in, and there's just two remaining anchovy producers in Couleur, and they're all kind of dressed up with their stripy shirts, and they're playing kind of traditional instruments and songs as they land their boats. And then there's a big festival with lots of different tastings and demos and lots of crafts to we're making anchovy related pottery, or I bought the most exquisite embroidered apron.
Nice.
That's really, really lovely as well. There are quite a few anchovy festivals. Most of them happen from June, July time. And there are
And
also anchovy museums.
yes, I was going about to say there are also anchovy museums as well. So another way to celebrate this little fish. So you were just telling me before we started recording, there's a new one opening up.
Well, as far as I understand, it's literally opening today, and in Santonio, which is in the heart of Cantabria, where there are 43 conservers, and it's very much a small fishing town. It's not a kind of tourist-focused place at all, really. Quite lots of Spanish people go there, but I wouldn't say it's that on the international map yet. But seeing as there's so much interest in anchovies and tinned fish, I presume they decided to kind of get up there with the kids and get on with opening a museum, which I think was really, really overdue. And from what I've seen online only, it is in English and in Spanish, and it's quite interactive. And I look forward to discovering more. But there certainly are more anchovy museums than you might expect. There's one at La Scala that I was talking about earlier for its festivals, and the anchovy producers in Color both have like little museums in their own premises with lots of photography and old tins and different pieces of equipment and so on. But the absolute best museum, which is kind of bonkers in a really good way, is in Sicily, and it's just outside Palermo in a place called Aspra, which is itself a fishing village where anchovies are caught, and there's a family anchovy producer called Balestro, and the guy with the improbable but very suitable name of Michelangelo has opened a museum, and it is really an experience. I mean, it's truly experiential, and they want you to become an anchovy producer whilst you're there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he has various people working there who are artists who run studios. It's a great big rambling building, but they also become actors when they're asked to be. And there's this guy who looks like a caricature sailor who's also a sculptor, and he was pretending to be a fisherman, and I had to be like the lady bringing in the catch, and then pretending to be a sobrador. So that was how it all started. And then he went on to show me the first love of his life, which was a lady on an anchovy tin. And he'd composed a song to her on a guitar that was shaped like an anchovy. And then he met someone in real life who he said resembled her, who's now his long-suffering wife.
Oh my God.
And then you kind of went round, and there was just anything and everything you could think of, from paintings on old bits of wood by fishermen to these really, really beautiful reconstructions of the village in miniature, and quite a bit on kind of mafia. I gather there'd been quite a lot of negotiating to keep the mafia at bay in that part of Sicily. And then when you think there can't be any more, he's kind of reproduced how Aspra used to be, with like the old-fashioned shops, like the barbers and the bakers and so on. And then there's this velvet curtain, and you go into a cinema, and it turns out that the producer of my favorite film, probably of all time, Cinema Paradiso, I don't know if you know it.
Yeah.
Anyway, the guy who wrote it and produced it, Giuseppe Tornatore, is from Aspra too, and is one of his best friends. And so he's let him like take liberties with the film and basically do his own edits, and he'd edited me into a version of it.
Oh, wow.
I think he probably does that with lots of people, and probably, erases it afterwards. But it was all very, very emotional because I love that film so much. And at the beginning, he'd said, "Oh, I'm going to make you laugh and make you cry," and I was like, "Yeah, right," and he did.
Yeah, I do actually remember that bit in the book, and you're right, it does come across. He sounds absolutely bonkers, but good fun.
utterly charming and really, really passionate about
Yeah,
his subject. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And we had to communicate in Google Translate because yeah, that was the only way. So probably quite a lot was lost in translation.
Well, I don't know. It sounds like it was tremendous fun anyway, and a great way to learn about
Yeah.
history. I mean, obviously you're passionate about anchovies, but I think if you had anyone
Yeah.
sitting on the fence. So, what are the threats facing the anchovy fishing and processing today? Because I'm wondering whether, a stock's dwindling. Is climate change having any impact at all?
I'm not aware that there's any problem with the stocks in the Cantabrian Sea. I mean, anchovies are wild fish and they reproduce like crazy. I mean, a mature female anchovy can produce 20,000 eggs a year. So there's not really a problem there. And the Cantabrian Sea is sort of MSC approved. Anchovies are a wild fish, but the stocks have dwindled over the years in the Mediterranean, and that's not a new problem. I mean, they used to be fished plentifully around Colour, and now they have to bring in anchovies from further afield, the Bay of Biscay, and some actually come from South America. Apparently, there are problems in South America with the number of anchovies, but I think that's more to do with the fact that they're being used for fish feed
Yeah.
rather than human consumption, which is a kind of whole other issue, which it shouldn't be the case. I mean, they're a brilliant source of protein and affordable, and if local people ate them, would probably be a really good thing. Farm fish are not my favourite thing, but the more pressing problem, as far as I became aware, is of having enough trained sobradores. Because although there are a lot of people who are happy to still do it and want to keep on their family tradition, there are a lot of other opportunities, opening up to women who might want to pursue other careers. But actually, just thinking about it right now, with the advance of AI taking out a lot of more entry level IT jobs, I mean, a lot of people are talking about moving back to doing things like being an electrician or a plumber or a carpenter. And so these are sorts of jobs which, they're never going to be done by robots because that's not their nature, or certainly not at the high end. So yeah, they may actually be flooded with inquiries soon when people switch on. But certainly, I could see that there were more non-local women working in the conservers.
So I said at the beginning that the anchovy is one of the most divisive fish in the world. Why do you think some people have a problem with it? Not those with allergies, obviously. I understand if you have an allergy to fish, that's a big issue. I'm just talking about people who don't like it from a taste perspective. And can an anchovy hater ever be converted to an anchovy tolerator or even an anchovy lover?
I'm convinced they can, hence my evangelism. I mean, I think a lot of people have only ever experienced poor quality anchovies and had them as all shriveled up and dry on the top of a pizza, or maybe had one that's very salty and full of little bones that stick in your throat. And if that's your experience of anchovies, I'm not surprised you don't like them. But there's much more to them than that. So I think it's partly a question of education, or people being open to the idea of spending a bit more money on an anchovy and considering it as a essential ingredient to their meal rather than just a little thing on the side. So, whether you're going to use them to adorn some vegetable dish and, add them at the last minute, or some kind of beautiful salad, or put them on a pizza, or stuff fish with them. If you use really, really good quality anchovies, you're not going to need very many because the flavor is so immense. And
Absolutely.
so, you can justify spending more, say they were an alternative to buying some really, good meat or exotic fish or something like that. You make them the central ingredient. Or if you're indulgent and have the means to do it, a can of absolutely beautiful anchovies just opened at the table with really brilliant bread and butter. I mean, it's the finest start to a meal you can imagine. And a lot of restaurants are offering that now, and people go mad about it, but they could easily do it at home. It costs them a fraction of the cost.
So what should people look for then when they're selecting anchovies? And what should they avoid, more importantly?
Well, I think, as with most foods, you have to be really careful about reading the labels and kind of understand a bit more about them. I mean, some of the tins that are labeled as Cantabrian, they're not necessarily produced and packed in Cantabria, so they may well have been finished in a kind of mechanized way somewhere, Morocco or Bulgaria or somewhere else, or Peru. And you really, really have to read the small print. I was recently doing this taste test with Chef Tom Hunt of Supermarket Anchovies. And it was quite surprising how many of them claimed to be Cantabrian anchovies, but really weren't produced in Spain at all. And they're also, and this isn't necessarily indicated on the tin, well, it usually is if it's true. There's a distinction between spring Cantabrian anchovies and the later kind of which are the May, June kind of first catch of the season. And they're the kind of the best quality, the largest and the plumpest and most, will respond the best to being cured. And then there's a later season in midsummer. They can also be called Cantabrian anchovies, but the spring anchovies, and quite often if they're spring anchovies, they will indicate that, or say Costera on the tin. Those are the absolute best of the best.
Okay, so we know what to look for now. So you went on a proper anchovy odyssey. I think I can say that because you travelled all over Europe and to write the book. I mean, you can feel the love for every location that you've been to. And this is a really difficult question for you to answer. Is there a standout location or a location or a place that you have a particular fondness for?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, it's like picking your favourite child. It's very, very difficult to say. I mean, I love the sort of specialism of the anchovies from Pisciotto, which is a tiny village on the Salento coast. And we met, I think there may be one other fisherman, but basically these are a slow food procedure anchovy made according to this tradition that dates back to the Greeks, and they're matured in these special barrels that they have a dispensation to still use. And well, the anchovies taste incredible. They have a particular sweetness which I've never experienced elsewhere. And when you look down on the port from sort of higher up in Pisciotto, there's a really nice hotel in a former monastery called Moralivio. It looks like you're looking at this little kind of Roman port, and the rest of the village is medieval. And I happened to be there doing my research over Easter, and they had this incredibly traditional, quite spooky kind of procession through the town. So I really like that. And also Color, where I first discovered how anchovies were crafted, and it's such a beautiful town. And I love Matisse, and he spent a lot of time there. It's where fauvism started. So that's another favourite.
Okay. Well, you did a very good job of answering that. I'm not sure I'd have been able to pick a favourite place having read the book. They all sound absolutely amazing. So each episode, I invite my guests to contribute a dish to the season's virtual potluck supper. Now, technically, this is a bonus episode, so it's not a season, but I'm a very greedy woman, so I always want my guests to contribute something to my dining table. So what dish will you be contributing?
Well, I haven't asked what time of year this is, or is it a dish you could kind of enjoy all year round?
Anything goes.
Anything goes. Well, one of my favourite, and I guess this is giving away a bit of a secret, is it's a Roman dish, and it's just so easy to make, but tastes absolutely fantastic. And it's a little bit surprising because we're all quite familiar with putting anchovy fillets into like a shoulder of lamb. But this is a casserole that you add anchovies and vinegar and garlic and olive oil. Well, it's immensely easy to make, and it cooks for a very, very long time.
Is it in your book?
Yes, it is in the book, but it's really just one of these long, slow dishes. And yeah, it smells fantastic as it's cooking, and it tastes really, really good, really sort of mellow umami, and very, very good with some saffron mash or some polenta and vegetables. And I imagine I've only served it hot, but I imagine it would be good at room temperature as well.
Yeah. Well, it sounds absolutely wonderful. So I'm very grateful for that contribution. And what's next on the horizon for you? You've been very busy, I know, promoting the book. Have you got more activities coming or events coming up?
Yeah, I've got lots more activities coming up. Later this month, in August, on the Wednesday the 19th, we're doing a love letter to Italian anchovies at Caldesi Marylebone. And I'm talking with Katie Caldesi about our shared love of anchovies and places in Italy that we've experienced them. And the antipasti is going to be 3 different kinds of anchovies served different ways and from different producers. So there'll be quite a lot of storytelling and a really lovely kind of rustic pasta course, and then stuffed fresh anchovies, Ligurian style. And this amazing salad that Katie and I both become obsessed with, which is a simplified version of one from Ciccio Sultano, who's a 2-star chef from Sicily. And it basically it's chopped lemons, fennel, and mint and anchovies in a dressing, and it's really, really good for summer entertaining. I mean, he says he serves it when he's having a barbecue with friends, and it's not the kind of thing he would put on his restaurant menu, but it's really good. So that will go with the main. And then we're going to have Knickerbocker Glory, nothing to do with anchovy ice cream. Although I did have anchovy ice cream.
You did, and actually there weren't there a couple of chocolate anchovy.
Yeah, chocolate mousse is made with anchovy too. And in Chitara, there was a chocolatier who made truffles with chocolate. But yes, I'm going to be at Abergavenny just before that Chiswick Literary Festival. Then I'm doing something at Folkestone Literary Festival. So lots of things going on. And I go to do some more tutored anchovy tastings where I bring along a whole lot, about 10 different anchovies, most of which you can't find easily or even at all in the UK. And we taste them, and I can tell stories from my travels. And then getting back a bit to journalism, thinking perhaps about another book.
Excellent. Sounds good. And of course, you are going to be one of our guests at the Serve It Forth Food History Festival in October, on the 17th of October.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that.
And thank you very much for your time today. It's been fascinating talking to you. I will put links to the book, and I will tell everyone to go forth and buy it because it's a great book, and you don't have to be an anchovy lover, but I guarantee you will want to try them at the very least, even if you're an anchovy hater or you think you don't like anchovies. I'm sure you'll be converted by the end of it.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you very much. Yeah, I've really enjoyed talking to you. You asked such brilliant questions.
Don't forget to visit Sudi's website for more details on her work and events such as the Anchovy Dinner at Caldesi Restaurant in London and the Serve It Forth Food History Festival. You can also follow Sudi's Anchovy Travels on Instagram and Substack. I'll also be posting a couple of anchovy savoury recipes on the Comfortably Hungry Substack soon, including William Verrill's. They'll be available to all subscribers, so be sure to sign up if you haven't done so already. I'll be hitting the road again myself in September. You can catch me at the Ludlow Food Festival on the 11th of September with my fellow A is for Apple hosts Dr. Alessandra Pino and Dr. Neil Buttery. I'm also returning to the Gloucester History Festival on the 19th of September, where I'll be talking about the history of chocolate, alongside Catherine Laverack of Cocoa Encounters, who will be explaining how to taste chocolate. I'll be back in a few weeks with another bonus episode when I delve into the complexities of hosting a dinner party with chef and writer Jago Rackham. Comfortably Hungry is research produced and presented by food historian Sam Bilton, with sound mixing and production by Thomas Dinas of the Delicious Legacy podcast. Additional sound effects and music are provided by Zapsplat and Pom5.